Alrighty, everyone, good evening and welcome back to the Black Robe podcast. As you may already know, my name is Anzhane Slaughter and I am sitting here with the founder of the IBJ, Miss Carol Mitchell. How you doing, Carol?
I am doing beautifully. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and well, it'll be even better once we can get some justice in the neighborhood. Ain't that right?
That is exactly what you and I are going to talk about tonight. It
That
has
sure is.
been
So our
quite a week.
It has been. And so this week, Carol, we found some new information regarding the Manuel Ellis case. Is that right?
Yes, we're not even going to bother with housekeeping today
Yeah,
because
we don't have time.
it's such an important issue. And I've had a few friends say, well, what does the Black community want us to do? White allies, people who want to support justice for all, equity and justice for all, which is what we stand for.
Mhm.
What do you want us to do? And Anjane, I what I have said to them is I want you to be just as outraged as you were when you found out about the takeover of the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. I
Mhm.
want you just as engaged, just as active, creating just as many memes, standing down at the county city building and the city council building,
Mhm.
showing up on Zoom,
Right.
speaking for 5.5 hours if you have
Mhm.
to. That's what I want
Yeah, absolutely. That
because
same level of commitment.
same level.
Mhm.
Because Manny died in this instance. Tacoma Pierce County Health Department didn't die
Right.
violent death. Manny Ellis died a violent death. And we now have this new information. Thank you very much, Patrick Malone of the Seattle Times.
Yes, thank you for keeping us informed. But you're absolutely right, Carol. We have to keep the pressure, the stamina, the endurance, momentum, whatever you want to call it, on this topic because it's just going to continue to get swept under the rug as it's been for, just decade after decade, case after case. And it's not just showing up, right? We actually have to hold these police officers accountable. We have to hold our justice system accountable. That's what the Pierce County community did when they found out that the council was trying to do this backhanded, fast, little slick, deals, right? We said, hold on, you're not going to exclude us from the conversation, right? We're here and you need to consult us, right? So we need to hold the police department accountable same way that we held our county council accountable.
So, what did we find out last week, thanks to Patrick Malone? He is an investigative reporter with the Seattle Times. And ironically, the Seattle newspaper has to break the story of what is going on in Tacoma. I'm a little disappointed about that. But
Yeah.
he has been digging into this since early April, May, June. I
Mm-hmm.
saw his first public disclosure request come across my desk sometime last May.
Wow.
So he has been digging in this topic since it
Mm-hmm.
first hit the news. He wanted to know everything that was going on. Now, somehow, he manages to get the report from the Washington State Patrol.
Wow.
So, how come the rest of us haven't seen or heard about it?
Mm-hmm.
That's my first question. How long has Pierce County and the
Mm-hmm.
city of Tacoma known these facts? I went
Yeah.
back and took a look, and the city put out this what I call a preemptive strike. It's like
Hmm.
when you know some mess is about to come rolling down the hill, you
Mm-hmm.
start digging the ditch around it to contain it before it starts rolling because
Right.
you know it's coming. And so you want to put up some defenses
Right.
before it
Protections.
hits.
Mm-hmm.
They did that before Thanksgiving. You saw this, hey, the
Yeah.
state patrol is working on its investigation and about to come to a conclusion. I believe And until somebody tells me I'm wrong, they knew
Mhm.
then, they found out then, if not earlier,
Yeah.
that these two additional officers were involved. One, a Pierce County Sheriff's Department deputy who had been off duty, just had come from his job at Pacific Lutheran University,
Wow.
his side hustle,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
gets the call and shows up on the scene and somehow manages to be on the ground with his knee on Manny Ellis, which means
And he was off duty?
he was off duty, but he was actively involved.
Mm-hmm. Where's the
Why?
order?
Why was Pierce County investigating? Now, look, I was working there at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody mentions that this officer was on the scene until June 10th. Now, so we've
Wow.
known a while that some
Yeah.
officer was there. That's the reason for the conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
why Mary Robnett could
Mm-hmm.
not, in good conscience, file any charges or do an investigation because she knew Pierce County had some culpability. One of our own was there at the scene with his knee on the back.
Wow.
But that
Wow.
officer has never been put on admin leave. Why?
Mm-hmm. Well,
The
because well,
second
we know
the
why, right?
and the fifth Tacoma officer still not on admin leave. He is the one, according to the story, who put the spit mask on Manny's face. It
Mm-hmm.
seems to me like he would be one of the most culpable in this
Mm-hmm.
investigation, but he's still working.
Right,
They're
because it was
they're
the
both
spit
working.
mask. It was the spit mask that suffocated Manny, right? I
It
mean,
certainly contributed
absolutely.
from what I know about the medical examiner's findings, that spit mask either contributed greatly to his death or
Mm-hmm.
was the primary cause of his death.
And
So,
these are the two people that we're just now finding out about. Yeah.
and funny, we find out the story breaks. See, I pay very close attention to significant events and what sequence of time.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Akey gets promoted to interim chief. Two
Right. With
days later, the Seattle Times article breaks. Today or Tuesday, the police labor agreement comes before the council. It's
mm,
like, okay, you're not telling me that no one in leadership at the city or the county knew that this story was coming out, knew what the investigation was going to reveal.
mm-hmm.
They knew
Oh
ahead of
yeah, this
time.
was
I know
all
how this stuff
planned.
works.
There was definitely a strategy going on behind this and the timing of everything. I
It is
mean,
not coincidental that you had all of these big things happening in sequence one to another. Trust me, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
mm-mm.
I have worked 15 years of my life inside of government. I know how it operates, and I guarantee you, leadership at the county and leadership at the city knew what was coming in that report and knew
Mm-hmm.
that story was going to hit within a day or two.
Mm-hmm. So, Carol, do you think that, this is just the county protecting the city protecting the county? I mean, is that why we're not seeing any progress here? Everybody's just, protecting each other, right? Oh, I won't tell them your name. I won't say that you were present there. You don't have to. I mean, and if that's the case, everybody's just protecting each other, then where is justice in that? Everybody wants to protect their pensions. Everybody wants to protect their
Mm-hmm.
family or their reputation, right? Of course, their freedom, but when are we going to hold people accountable? When do you have to face the consequences of your actions? Isn't that an American principle? Isn't that one of the
In
principles,
theory, in
right?
theory,
In theory.
but I had to tell somebody, because we posted the story, the Seattle Times story. We
Mm-hmm.
posted it,
Mm-hmm.
and put a series of questions out there and shared them with the public. They're on our Facebook page.
Hmm.
But honestly, to answer your question about where is justice, it's in the morgue most of the times when we're talking about these situations.
Hmm. It's the
The,
evidence.
the justice is dead.
Yeah. Oh, well.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's in the ground with Manny Ellis right now.
Mhm.
Part of the problem is the law and how it protects governmental actors. There is this almost a shield of protection around governmental actors. And all the way up to the very top, you can see people engaging in criminal behavior. No
Mhm.
name shall be called, but
Mhm.
one of them called the Secretary of State of Georgia and tried to coerce him. You see this criminal behavior happening, but because you're a governmental actor, it's almost as if we can't do anything about it. That means you've got to change the law.
Mhm. Yeah.
You've got to change the law. And I 940 was an attempt to change the law. But then when governmental entities don't follow the law,
Right.
then what do you do?
Right. Or when it's like how we see day in and day out that the government entities themselves are the ones that are put in place to have the checks and the balances, right? It's all these internal investigative
Mm-hmm.
uh systems. That's problematic too, right? So
Well, you touched on it, Anjane, when you said everybody's protecting everybody else. There's a $30 million lawsuit. Manny Ellis's family has a $30 million lawsuit that's been
mhm.
filed. It hasn't named Pierce County, but if I were a gambler, which I'm not, because my mama raised me differently,
She raised you right.
I would bet that they're going to join or include Pierce County as a defendant. Now
As they
that they
should.
now that they know that this other officer contributed to the takedown and the subduing of Manny, I would not be surprised at all if you ended up with Pierce County as a defendant as well, and these two other officers being named.
Well,
So
we do
yeah,
have.
everybody goes into defense mode, right?
Mhm.
They're worried about being sued. They're worried about losing a lawsuit and paying out these big claims. But guess what?
What's that?
They have risk insurance, right?
Right, exactly. They
So,
have the money.
I mean, I'm not saying it's all public money. It's all public money.
Mhm.
So, Mandy's family paid into that pool of money too. You know, the people who are being abused by that system have also
Oh
put
yeah.
their life and energy and money into that
Mhm.
same public system, and they don't get the benefit out of it that they've invested in. So, yeah, everybody's worried about money,
Yeah.
worried about being sued, worried about being reelected. And so, those things are more important to them than somebody's life and doing what's right.
Yeah. Well, you got to get
How are
real.
you dealing with it though? How are you feeling about it? To find out there were two more officers, their names have sort of been kept in the wind. They're
Mhm.
still working.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely a sad day. It's definitely a sad day to hear that justice has not been had. I mean, like you said, Manny was killed in March of
Hmm.
2020. It's now January of 2021 and new information is surfacing. So, I'm extremely disappointed in our criminal justice system as I've been, right? But it's hard to continue to trust that there are police officers out there to protect us, right? That these systems are put in place to protect us. When we see case after case that they're not, right? Case after case
Hmm.
that the people that are in the positions of power that really do control these systems have their own agenda that does not really care about my life or the next person's life, but they care more so about their budgets or
Hmm.
their reelection. You know,
Hmm.
how do young people like myself trust in a system like this? Why would the next generation want to go into law enforcement, even with the purest of a heart, right? The purest of a heart, which is to protect their community, which is to like to to provide just basic protections, right? Why would people want to enter into that system when they know that there's all these different things going on in the background, right? That it's not going to operate in an ethical way that maybe they would have intended when going in, right?
And when they get into it, there's a tremendous amount of pressure to let go of Black culture and take on blue culture. You are no longer representing your community. You are representing the community of those who are armed and badged. And if you don't fit into that culture, you will not last long and you may end up dead.
And that is the sad reality, because we've seen it. I've seen it on social media, videotapes, recordings of Black police officers, that are over, that are just brutalizing the public, other Black people, using just
let's talk about that.
Force.
Let's talk about that, because one of the respondents to our comments on this matter on our Facebook page, which you and I have had this debate. It's like, if you don't like what we're saying and talking about, just click on by.
Right.
But if you're going to take the time to engage with me on our Facebook page, then you have to be prepared to be angry if you don't agree with us. And that's okay. You can be angry, but you cannot be disrespectful.
No.
So, and you can't, start cussing, fussing, whatever it is. Go do that on your page.
Yeah.
But one person basically had the nerve to put a certain Black commentator. I'm not even going to call his name because I don't want to give him any more street cred or social media attention.
Yeah.
Some of those officers and social commentators are making a living off of hating other Black folk. I think it's a form of self-hate. It's a way of distancing themselves from Black folk. And then, it's an us and them within the culture, right? It's a hierarchy within the culture. I made it, so why can't you make it? I managed to move up to the east side like the Jeffersons. So what's wrong with you that you can't pull yourself out of a hole? And one person said to me, and I agreed, what about Black on Black violence? Isn't that the real issue? Don't we really have to deal with that? And the answer is yes. That's the reason the IBJ, that's why we're here. Is to deal with the underlying issues in the Black community that would cause something so tragic as Black on Black violence. But I think, as my friend Sally Perkins would say, the system is set up to accomplish exactly what it accomplishes. It's by design. Now, what are you thinking? I know you've been trying to get in here.
There's so many different things that you said. I should have been taking notes as you were talking. I'm like, I gotta touch on each one. But starting with the last thing that you said in the Black on Black violence, right? I really want to make this very clear. We cannot use Black on Black violence to dismiss the police brutality that is happening out here in the streets. Okay.
Agree.
But let's dive into this Black on Black violence just a little bit more, okay? Because we know that gangs evolved, especially on the West Coast. We're here in Washington State, but in California, gangs were very prevalent on the West Coast of the United States. This is where they started, okay? And it just so happened to be around the same time of mass incarceration and the war on drugs, okay? Once our communities were pumped with crack cocaine, this created a market, right? To sell drugs. Now you have to protect yourselves and your territories and your blocks and your market, right? You do that with gangs. And there's all different types of gangs, but these gangs, in order for them to protect themselves, right, that's what caused the violence. So if we really want to talk about the underlying root issues, right, we cannot blame the individuals. We cannot blame Black people for Black on Black crime. Okay, we did not create. I mean, I just want, this is coming from my opinion.
I love it. No,
Everybody might
I
have their own
totally
opinion.
agree. No, I agree with you because there is no way in the world that the drug trade could operate at the scale that it does in the absence of folks in a very powerful place allowing that to happen
Mhm.
or themselves benefiting from it.
Yeah, and
That money is flowing.
yeah.
It's not staying in the African American community,
Oh
and
no,
they're not the cartels.
not at all. No.
Those drugs are coming in through a system. I mean, they're coming in on ships, they're coming in on airplanes.
Yeah.
Somebody at a very high level is allowing that process to happen. And unfortunately, poor folk who see that as their only occupation or vocation or only way to pay the light bill get caught up in that market. But the real winners in the drug game are people that you and I might think are legitimate.
Absolutely. And there's declassified records, United States records on this. I studied when taking a couple courses, in law and policy at University of Washington. This is fact. This is not conspiracy.
That's right.
Okay, the U.S. government definitely had their hands in a lot of drug pots. Okay, relations with Mexico and so forth. So whenever we hear conversation about Black on Black crime, do not blame the Black community for that. And if you want to say, oh, well, that was the 80s, that was then, this does not, it didn't end then. It trickles down generationally, right? When your family, I honestly was not, I wasn't born into a gang affiliated family, but I do have friends that were, right? And that's not something that is just dismissed. That's part of their family culture, And so it's just ridiculous.
And guess what?
Us.
If you're one of those gang affiliated families, guess what the prosecutor does? Your name goes on a list and you can't even get certain diversion.
Oh my God.
Right? You can't get into therapeutic courts. Why? Because you're on a quote gang affiliated list because your mama and your grandmama were on the list.
Exactly. As little bit as a last name. A last name holds a lot of weight in certain gangs in certain states. You might not have any sort of criminal history or record, but with that last name associated with you, now you have that mark. And it's just so unfortunate. It really is.
Too bad nobody can pardon you in advance. Your mama and daddy don't have the power to pardon you for your anticipated charges that are coming up in your life, like some folks that we know at the top of the country. They can pardon their child in advance.
Right? And let's not forget, as we're on this conversation of gangs, how the Black Panther Party was portrayed as a violent gang, right?
They had clinics, food banks. A lot of that story is never really told, how they really came in and filled a gap. And let's talk about welfare policy in the 60s and 70s and 80s that basically said, hey, Black woman, if you have a child and you're not married to the child's father, he can't come live with you or you won't receive welfare assistance. So you have to choose. You either get your food stamps and your TANF, or you get your man, but you can't have both. What kind of craziness was that?
Yeah.
You basically paid for fathers to be unattached to their children, and the ones who weren't incarcerated had to sneak around to see their own women, their own children, because the money to feed and clothe those children was in such short supply. They couldn't even live in the same house. Even now, We have rules in place that say a father or mother that's been incarcerated can't live in certain public housing. It's still true. We're still doing foolishness like that. And then we wonder why young people get affiliated with gangs. You have totally disrupted the family system since we arrived on the
Mhm.
first slave ships in the 1700s.
Yep.
You
And
disrupted the Black family.
absolutely. These sort of policies, these sort of oppressive policies that are built into all of these, institutionally racist systems, right? That is how this white supremacy just continues to be, just have this snowball effect, right? I mean, it's written within these systems. This is how you see um the disproportionality within the sanctions, right? The people
Oh,
that are kicked
right.
off of TANF and Section 8, right? How it's disproportionately black people because these sort of policies are disproportionately targeting black families.
They
And
are.
so
And
it's
being
just
judgmental, if you're not married to the father, then he can't live there,
right.
or you have to choose between TANF and your father being the child's father being around. And let's not even talk about miscegenation and breeding that happened during slavery, where Black folk were treated much like animals, producing children for the purpose of working as the
Mhm.
economic backbone of this country. And then you want to have the nerve to say that we have too many children out of wedlock. You set it up that way.
Right. Yeah.
And now there's too many Black children. Well, hey, you shouldn't have been breeding Black women
Hmm.
when they were in slavery, and you might not have an overpopulation problem. Right. So, I mean, you created this system, and now that it's backfiring, you want to blame Black folks for it. That's like saying a woman who has been assaulted, if she hadn't worn a short skirt, she wouldn't have been assaulted. You've heard those kinds of crazy arguments,
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
you're
Oh
the victim is responsible for somebody else's criminal behavior.
yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Right. And Carol,
And
I just want
that's
to
what
push.
we saw with Manny.
Yep. And Carol, I want to push back and say I don't think it's backfiring. I think that this system is doing exactly what the engineers and the
Mm-hmm.
pioneers intended for it to do, right? Which was to continue to keep us down, right? To continue to put, oh, we overcome one obstacle, no worries. We'll put another one in front of you, right? Oh, you think we're making some progress? Oh, no worries. The system still isn't going to protect you, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is really what was intended. So when we talk to people like me, and I think it's so important for all young people to just be aware of this is our history. So in order for us to really make progress in the future, we have to know how these systems have been able to put us down, right? So in one light, this conversation could be very just tiring, right? And we're just running on a list of
Mm-hmm.
how the white man continues to beat us down, But in another way, it's very informative because
Mm-hmm.
what this can do, this information, if you don't know this information, one might think that they're in a generational curse, right? One might,
Right.
right? They really they'll give up on life. They'll go to drugs because they think, oh well, that is my only way out, right? Um, and
And
so
let's talk about trauma.
yeah, yeah,
You and I, we talk sometimes about, Dr. Wendy Ellis's theories around adverse community experiences and adverse childhood experiences.
yeah.
When you have suffered trauma, I have a member of my extended family who saw his brother knifed to death, and when they called 911, nobody came. Now, if
Nobody.
you grow up seeing people killed in front of you, you don't think that that person is going to be traumatized. And yes, some people cope with their pain and their trauma using
Mhm.
substances. But that's universal. That is not just a Black thing.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
universal problem.
Hmm.
And we all need to heal from some of the things that have happened to us as children. We
Mm-hmm.
have to find a way to live out the purpose for which we were born in spite of the trauma. Some people never quite get there. The drugs and the alcohol, they self medicate that pain because they don't know how else to cope.
Right.
And to
Yeah.
some degree, one person said, well, was Manny on drugs that night? Well, what if he was? Does he still not have the right to life and liberty and the pursuit
Right.
of happiness, even if he might have been struggling with a substance issue because he suffered some form of trauma in his life that he
Right.
couldn't cope with? Does that make him less human? I don't
Mm-hmm.
think so.
Nope, and it does not dismiss the charges of all of these five officers. It doesn't. I mean, if
Well,
people would do this to our
six if you
six,
count the one from the sheriff's department.
yep, so it's six now. But they've been doing this. I mean, the new media, you hear it in our politics, right? Dismissing these lives, these innocent lives based on, oh, they're going to say they were gang affiliated. They have a picture, with them repping a certain color,
Or a certain tat, right?
or a certain tattoo. Exactly. And now all of a sudden it's okay. That's justice. It's just, it's not fair. It's not just here on the Black Robe podcast, right?
No, it isn't. And
No.
again, where we started this conversation tonight, we want people to be just as outraged about what's happening in this case that has drug on now for nearly 315 days, I think it is, or
Mm,
310 days, whatever, almost a year.
yeah.
That family deserves justice. And actually, it's beyond being a Black family for me. That family, this community, deserves better than what we have seen happen in this case. Now, thankfully, the Attorney General has appointed a special prosecutor, and that person is going to do the job that Mary Robnett would have done had she not had a conflict with Pierce County's sheriff being on the scene. They knew this back in June.
Man.
And
And it,
so
but
that now there's a special prosecutor who will decide whether to file charges against this officer.
well, I'm hoping that that's a step in the right direction. At least it's not some internal investigation, right? I'm assuming this other prosecutor doesn't have any links to either side, right?
Well, I do know who it is, and they were a former member of the bench,
Mm,
so a judge and a
mm-hmm,
lawyer, but definitely would understand what the law requires and what it would take in order to file a charging decision. So, definitely a person who has credibility. I will say this, at the end of the day, a young man who was turning his life around is now dead. Tamir Rice was only 12 years old, right? Casey Goodson was in his 20s.
23.
And someone said to me on the web page, "Well, what about all the white people that get killed?" And I have a problem with that too. But if you look at the proportion of Black to white, it's a disproportionate number of Black men in particular that die as a result of police contact.
Absolutely.
It's the disproportionality that bothers us. We're not
Definitely.
happy to see anyone die as a
No.
result of injustice.
And that argument was, first brought up with the Black Lives Matter, then people countered it with the, well, all lives matter, not just Black Lives Matter. Okay, yes, all lives do matter, but this is the topic of discussion right now, right? This is
Well,
what we're seeing right now. If I can't speak for everyone in the Black community, because as we mentioned earlier in today's episode, Black, just because we share the same culture doesn't mean we share the same politics.
that's right.
But from my mouth, if I were to see a white, yellow, blue person wrongfully killed time and time again, I would stand up stand out, speak out, because that's just unjust. It has nothing to do. The fact that it's continuously Black people is just, it just shows that this is a serious problem. This is a race
Mm-hmm.
problem
It's
because we don't see it.
disproportionately Black people.
Exactly.
And the word all, Anjane, the word
Mm-hmm.
all, when all men were created equal,
Mm.
that did not include Black men.
Nope.
When the Constitution said liberty and justice for all, the framers of the Constitution were still holding slaves. The
Mm.
very people who wrote the Constitution were holding slaves. They did not have all Black people included in the word all.
Well, we weren't
That's the
considered
reason,
people.
that is the reason we say Black Lives Matters.
Mm-hmm.
We want it clear
Mm-hmm.
that we want the protections that all had when the Constitution were framed, right? Right to own property, right to have
Right.
a life, liberty, pursuit of happy, to be free of cruel and unusual punishment. That's what all had, but Black folks didn't get it. And
Yeah.
we still have to fight for it. Here we
Mm-hmm.
are, right? Hundreds of
Absolutely.
years later, still having this conversation, still trying to be all. We're
Still
not in
trying
the
to be all.
all. We're
Mm-mm.
not in the all.
Nope. Language and discretion, interpretation are so like important, right? When it comes to law, when it comes to our constitution. Because back then we weren't considered people. We were property,
That's
right?
right.
Someone owned us. So maybe in the context at that time of, well, a person is a white man. Yeah,
That's
all
correct.
people,
Wait,
all white
wait.
men.
White male property owners. That's who
Right.
the all were. So if you were a poor white man with no property, you weren't even in the all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't use all.
Yeah, don't use all. We have to be distinct and define
That's
what we're talking
right.
about. And that does
Right.
not take away from the white people, okay? We do love the white allies. We do love our white
Hey,
people.
but women weren't in the all either.
Yeah, no.
So
No.
all does not mean all. It never has meant all.
No.
That's
No.
why we say Black. So it's clear to you who we're talking about. And as I said to this person, this is the Institute for Black Justice. So that's why we talk about Black folk on this Facebook page.
In case you didn't know.
Now
Yeah.
look, listen, I want you to be encouraged. I know this is incredibly disturbing news. And
Yeah.
what is it that if you had your wish as a beautiful 24-year-old Black woman, what would you want the city and the county to do to make it right?
Oh man. Well, first we have to fire and prosecute all six
Mm,
of those police officers, whether you were on duty or not, that were a part of the Manuel Ellis, his death. I mean, that's just the first step. Then I want to start seeing some laws that actually hold these systems accountable in these situations. There's
mm-hmm.
no there should be a punishment if it goes a 6 months. I mean, where is the progress in this case? There should be no exception while we're hearing new information over 9 months after the fact. So I want to see some accountability. And you're not going to start hearing these asks or demands from me or the community or the IBJ until we see some progress. Because I mean, I don't feel safe. I don't. This trickles down into our everyday
Mm,
lives. This trickles
mm,
right. This trickles down into the legitimacy of the county and of the city, of the trust that the people have with the county and the city. And this is the young people, right? So we're gonna be here for some time. You know, you want to build these relationships with us now so that we can work together, right? I mean, if that is your agenda, and if
and
not,
don't just run these funky commercials about how you're working for justice for and
mm-mm,
equity for all. Don't just put Black folks in a commercial trying to say that you're
yeah,
really doing justice. That is like the oldest trick in the book to try to pretend that you're really doing something by running commercials. That's what the county's doing right now. They're running
Yeah, county,
commercials.
we're
Uh,
done with the DEI
yeah,
training.
forget running commercials. Why don't you actually set up? Here's what I would love to see. I love what you've said. I would love to see a citizen community led commission that actually has some authority to provide oversight into these investigations, right? The police commission that we have in Tacoma is really more advisory. They really don't have the teeth that the
Yeah.
Seattle Police Commission has. A citizen led oversight commission of some sort where the community can bring its grievances to that commission. The same way, if you feel as if your housing rights are being discriminated, there's an office at the city where you go to file a complaint against your landlord. Well, what about if you feel like you're being mistreated by police? Where do you go? You have no place to go. The county could create such an enforcement entity that would look into these matters and maybe give citizens a place to get their grievances heard. There's also no claim available in the law. If the county violates I-940, there's no claim in there that a person agreed, like the Ellis family, they can't do anything about the fact that it's taken 9 months, because there's nothing in the law that says if you don't get this thing done within X number of months, there's a civil claim. You can be made to pay money. It's all based on wrongful death. I think we'll have to bring James Bible back on
Yeah.
to tell us what his strategy is. But I-940 doesn't have any real teeth either right now. There's no sanctions if you violate it. That's why a lot of the police departments don't even bother to follow
They
it.
don't care. The enforcement, the teeth, that is what holds people accountable. You need to be almost like scared of breaking the rule a little bit. You
The
know,
same way you and I are scared of committing a crime.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we
Exactly.
don't.
Isn't that the deterrence? Isn't that what's going to keep people from?
Right.
So, yeah, I really love that. Somewhere to go when you've been, where is the customer service department for the Tacoma Police Department?
And don't call the PIO, right? The public
Uh,
information officer is not
no.
your friend.
No.
But
Well, we're gonna keep a close eye on this case and any sort of
Yes.
other new developments that come to the surface. Thank you so much, Carol, for keeping us informed here on these new updates, because we have to keep. I mean, the community, we're the only ones that is holding anyone accountable at this point, right? The county is protecting the city's protecting the county. So the IBJ, we're gonna do our best effort to keep us all in the loop so that we can make sure everyone stays informed and that justice truly is served.
That's right. Our vision is true justice with no exceptions. So that includes all. But we're gonna.
It's very inclusive.
our focus is on Black folks, because if we fix what's going wrong for Black folks, it'll benefit all others. That's our perception of why it's important to focus in on the community that's the most harmed by these policies. And I just want you to be encouraged. There is still hope. And your generation is a big part of changing the landscape for the future. So stay engaged, stay hopeful, don't give up. A change is going to come.
Thank you so much, Carol, for those inspiring words. Well, that's it for us in our segment today of the Black Robe podcast. Again, my name's Anzhane Slaughter, and this is Carol Mitchell.
Yes.
We'll see you guys next week.
Yes, indeed. Bye.
Bye.